I should have known something was off the moment I stepped into Marcus Elwood's sprawling mansion. Marcus wasn't just my business partner, he was my closest friend, the man who turned my fledgling startup into a billion-dollar empire with his ruthless intellect and unwavering drive. But standing there in his opulent home, empty, yet immaculately kept, something felt disturbingly wrong. The police had called me in for questioning earlier that day. They'd found a note, cryptic and unsettling, taped to Marcus's office desk. To those I love. Sometimes to be found, you must first be lost. That was it. No explanations, no farewells, just a single enigmatic sentence. His car was gone. His phone had been switched off. And now, a week later, everyone was desperate for answers. Ryan? Detective Bennett's voice broke my train of thought as he entered the room. He was a seasoned investigator, his sharp eyes scanning every inch of the mansion. You've known Marcus longer than anyone. If there's something you're not telling us, now would be the time. I met his gaze, forcing my nerves into submission. I've told you everything I know. He'd been under a lot of pressure lately, especially with the new venture capital deal. But disappearing? That's not Marcus. Bennett nodded, but his expression remained skeptical. A man doesn't just vanish without a reason. And that note? Sounds like he planned this. I stayed silent, my mind racing. The truth was, I'd noticed changes in Marcus over the past few months. He'd become paranoid, his conversations laced with vague hints about enemies and betrayals. I dismissed it as stress. Now, I wasn't so sure. After Bennett left, I wandered through the house. Every room seemed to echo with Marcus's presence, and yet it felt lifeless. In his study, I found myself staring at a photograph of the two of us from our early days, grinning like idiots at our first product launch. Beneath the photo was a handwritten note I hadn't noticed before, tucked under a paperweight. Ryan, trust no one. A chill ran down my spine. Was this a message for me, or part of the puzzle Marcus had left behind? I spent the next few days combing through Marcus's life. His office files revealed little beyond the usual corporate dealings. His personal laptop was encrypted, and even with my technical skills, I couldn't crack it. But his financial records, those told a different story. Bank statements showed transfers to offshore accounts, millions siphoned away over the past year. Shell companies, hidden investments, untraceable assets. Marcus had been planning something big, and he'd gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. The more I uncovered, the more questions arose. Why would Marcus, a man who seemingly had it all, orchestrate such an elaborate vanishing act? And who else knew about it? Late one night, as I sifted through yet another stack of documents, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. My heart pounded. Someone was watching me. But who? And why? There was no going back now. If Marcus was alive, I'd find him. And if he wasn't, I'd uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The warning message didn't deter me. It fueled me. It wasn't just the words that bothered me, but the implication behind them. Someone was watching. Someone knew I was closing in on something they didn't want uncovered. My phone sat on the desk in Marcus's study, the screen still lit with the text, "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." My first thought was to call the police, but what could I say? Hey, Detective Bennett, someone's spooked because I'm looking into my missing friends' accounts? They'd think I was paranoid or worse, guilty of something myself. Instead, I called Ethan. Ethan was an old friend from college and one of the few people I trusted. He worked in financial forensics for a private firm, the kind of guy who could track money trails that even seasoned investigators couldn't untangle. I explained the situation. Well, most of it. I left out the text message and the shadowy figure in the warehouse, not wanting to seem unhinged. When we met at his office the next morning, Ethan looked both intrigued and concerned. He laid Marcus's financial records on his desk, flipping through the pages. You're telling me Marcus Elwood, the golden boy of tech startups, was moving millions offshore? This doesn't add up, Ryan. Why would he need to hide money? His companies were legitimate, weren't they? Legitimate and thriving, I replied. At least that's what I thought. But these transfers, there's no reason for them. Not unless he was planning something big. Ethan leaned back, His brow furrowed. Big is an understatement. This kind of setup isn't just about hiding money. It's about disappearing entirely. Whoever structured this knew what they were doing. They used a web of shell corporations to make the funds untraceable. It's not illegal on its own, but it raises a lot of red flags. Can you dig deeper? I asked. Find out where the money went. Who's behind the shell companies? Ethan nodded. I can try, but it won't be easy. And Ryan, if someone warned you to back off, you need to take that seriously. This isn't just corporate secrecy. It's personal now. Personal was an understatement. After leaving Ethan's office, I drove aimlessly for a while, replaying everything I knew. The note Marcus left, the warning text, the cryptic trail of clues, it all pointed to one thing. Marcus had orchestrated his disappearance, and he wanted me to find him. But why? I returned to Marcus's house, now my unofficial command center. As I combed through his study for the 100th time, my eyes fell on his bookshelf. It was filled with first editions, many of them classics. One in particular caught my attention. The Odyssey. Marcus loved that book, always quoting lines about long journeys and hidden truths. When I pulled it off the shelf, I noticed it was heavier than it should have been. Inside, tucked between the pages, was a folded map. It wasn't ancient, but it wasn't modern either. It looked like a section of New York City, marked with faded ink and unfamiliar symbols. At the bottom, in Marcus's handwriting, was a set of coordinates. I plugged the coordinates into my phone and froze when the location popped up, an abandoned warehouse near the East River. It was the kind of place that had once thrived with industry, but now sat forgotten, a relic of a city that had moved on. When I arrived, the place was eerily silent. The faint hum of the river was the only sound as I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The warehouse was massive, its walls lined with rusting machinery and empty crates. In the center of the room, a table stood illuminated by a shaft of moonlight pouring through a cracked skylight. On the table was an envelope with my name scrawled across the front. Marcus's handwriting was unmistakable. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a small brass key and another note. The truth isn't always what it seems. The lock lies where it all began. Where it all began. That could only mean our first office. Years ago, Marcus and I had set up shop in a dingy building downtown, a far cry from the sleek corporate tower we now occupied. That building had since been renovated into luxury apartments, but if Marcus left something there, I was going to find it. As I pocketed the key, I heard something that made my blood run cold, a faint creak of floorboards. My flashlight flicked toward the noise, but the beam revealed nothing. The warehouse was too large, too dark. I turned off the light and waited, my breathing shallow. Minutes passed. Then, just as I was about to dismiss it as paranoia, a shadow moved in the corner of my vision. Someone was here. "Ryan," a voice called out, low and menacing. "You should have left this alone." My heart thundered in my chest. I didn't wait to see who it was. I bolted for the exit, the sound of hurried footsteps behind me. As I reached my car, I glanced back to see a figure silhouetted against the warehouse doorway. The key burned in my pocket as I sped away. Whoever was after me wasn't just desperate, they were dangerous. But I wasn't going to stop. Marcus wanted me to find the truth, and I'd follow his trail to the end, no matter the cost. The old office building looked nothing like it did when Marcus and I first rented a tiny corner suite there years ago. Back then, the place was grimy, outdated, and cheap, exactly what two broke entrepreneurs needed to get their start. Now it was sleek, modern, and painfully expensive, complete with a doorman who eyed me suspiciously as I walked in. I couldn't shake the unease that had been growing since the warehouse incident. Whoever was following me was playing a dangerous game, but I had no choice but to keep moving. The brass key in my pocket felt heavier with each step as I rode the elevator to the 7th floor. The hallway was quiet, lined with frosted glass doors that led to tastefully designed office spaces. The key didn't match any of the locks in our old suite, which was now occupied by some startup specializing in AI-driven marketing. I stood in the hallway frustrated until I remembered something. Marcus had always been fascinated with hidden compartments and secret spaces. If there was a clue here, it wouldn't be out in the open. I paced the hallway, running my hand along the walls, checking for anything out of place. My fingers brushed against a metal panel near the floor, a vent cover. It was loose. Kneeling down, I unscrewed it with my pocket knife and peered inside. Sure enough, there was a small, dusty lockbox hidden just out of view. The key slid in smoothly, and with a click, the lockbox opened. Inside was a stack of documents, a flash drive, and another handwritten note from Marcus. If you're reading this, Ryan, you're already in over your head. Take this to Ethan. He'll know what to do. And remember, trust no one. I didn't have time to process the message before the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. My heart leaped into my throat as I stuffed the lockbox contents into my bag and replaced the vent cover. Whoever was coming wasn't someone I wanted to meet. I slipped into a nearby stairwell and began my descent, my pulse hammering in my ears. The sound of the footsteps followed, deliberate and unhurried, as if whoever it was knew I had nowhere to go. By the time I reached the ground floor, I was practically running. I darted out the side entrance into the night, scanning the street for anything unusual. A black SUV idled at the curb, its engine rumbling softly. The driver's face was obscured, but I could feel their gaze as I walked quickly in the opposite direction. When I turned the corner, I broke into a sprint, weaving through alleys and side streets until I was sure I'd lost them. Only then did I stop, leaning against a brick wall to catch my breath. Back at my apartment, I locked the door and drew the blinds before dumping the lockbox contents onto the kitchen table. The documents were financial records, contracts, and correspondence, all pointing to a single name: Solomon Finch. Solomon Finch was a name I hadn't heard in years. He was one of Marcus's earliest investors, a shady venture capitalist with a reputation for ruthlessness. Marcus had severed ties with him after their partnership turned sour, but now it seemed Finch hadn't been completely cut out of the picture. The flash drive contained encrypted files, and I knew exactly who could crack them. I called Ethan again and asked him to meet me at his office. When I arrived, Ethan's expression was a mix of curiosity and concern. "What did you find this time?" he asked as I handed him the flash drive. "Something that ties all of this back to Solomon Finch," I said. "Marcus must have been tangled up with him again. Whatever's on that drive is important enough that someone doesn't want me to see it." Ethan nodded and got to work, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Minutes later, the files decrypted, revealing a trove of emails, spreadsheets, and blueprints. "What the hell is this?" Ethan muttered, scrolling through the documents. The emails painted a picture of a secret deal between Marcus and Finch, one that involved laundering money through offshore accounts. The spreadsheets detailed the transactions. Millions of dollars moved through a network of shell companies. And the blueprints? They showed plans for a secure facility. "This isn't just a financial scheme," Ethan said, his voice low. "They were building something. A vault, maybe? Or a data center?" Before I could respond, Ethan's computer screen flickered. The files began deleting themselves one by one. "Damn it," Ethan cursed, trying to stop the process. "They're wiping it remotely. Whoever's behind this knows we're looking." In a matter of seconds, the files were gone, leaving nothing but an empty desktop. "Did you save anything?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. Ethan nodded. "I managed to copy a few key files before they wiped it. But whoever's watching us isn't messing around, Ryan. You need to be careful." I didn't need the warning. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was more dangerous than I'd anticipated. Marcus hadn't just vanished. He'd gone into hiding to escape something, or someone, far more dangerous than I'd realized. And now I was right in the middle of it. The files Ethan managed to save led me to a name: Amelia Ward. She was listed as a consultant on several of the encrypted documents. I'd never heard of her before, but a quick search revealed she wasn't just any consultant. She was a high-profile risk strategist who worked exclusively with ultra-wealthy clients. If Marcus had been working with her, she might hold the key to everything. The tricky part was figuring out how to approach her without tipping anyone off. Amelia wasn't the kind of person you could just call up for a coffee. Her office was a fortress, and her client list was protected like state secrets. But desperation has a way of making you resourceful. After hours of digging, I found her schedule buried in the metadata of a corporate email thread. She had a dinner reservation at an exclusive restaurant downtown, the kind of place where people like me wouldn't get past the front door without a suit that cost as much as a car. I borrowed a tailored blazer from Ethan, slicked my hair back, and prayed the maitre d' wouldn't see through my act. When I arrived, I scanned the dimly lit dining room until I spotted her. Amelia Ward was every bit as intimidating in person as her reputation suggested, poised, elegant, and exuding an air of authority that made the room seem smaller around her. I approached her table, trying to mask my nerves. "Ms. Ward, I'm Ryan Carter. I think we need to talk." She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Do I know you?" "No," I admitted, "but you knew Marcus Elwood. And right now, I'm the only person trying to find him." Her eyes narrowed, but she gestured to the seat across from her. "You have 5 minutes, Mr. Carter. Make them count." I sat down, leaning in to keep my voice low. "Marcus is missing, and I've uncovered enough to know that you were involved in whatever he was planning before he disappeared. Offshore accounts, Solomon Finch, a secure facility. Ring any bells?" Amelia didn't flinch, but her gaze sharpened. "You're playing a dangerous game. If Marcus hasn't told you what's going on, he had a reason." "Marcus left me breadcrumbs," I said. "A cryptic note, financial records, encrypted files. He wanted me to figure this out, but someone's been trying to stop me at every turn. If you know something, I need you to tell me." She sighed, setting down her wineglass. "You're in over your head, Mr. Carter, but if Marcus trusted you, then maybe you can handle this." She paused as if weighing her next words. "Marcus came to me months ago, terrified. He'd uncovered something within his own company, something Finch had been orchestrating for years. Money laundering was just the tip of the iceberg. This was bigger." Global? I echoed, my mind racing. What does that even mean? Finch wasn't just laundering money. He was funneling it into a network of shadow corporations involved in everything from illegal arms deals to political bribery. Marcus stumbled onto the nexus point, a massive server farm where all of Finch's operations converge. He planned to expose it, but Finch got wind of it. "That's why Marcus disappeared," I said, realization dawning. "He's in hiding because Finch would kill him if he tried to go public." Amelia nodded. "But he didn't go quietly. The secure facility you saw in those files? That's where Marcus stored the evidence. Encrypted data, physical documents, everything he'd need to bring Finch down. The only problem is, Finch knows about it too." My stomach sank. "So it's a race to the facility." "Exactly," Amelia said. "Marcus trusted you enough to leave you clues. If you want to help him, you'll need to find that facility before Finch's people do." I leaned back, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "Where is it?" Amelia hesitated, then pulled a pen from her bag and scribbled something on a napkin. "This is the location. But be warned, Finch's people are ruthless. If you go after this, you're putting a target on your back." I folded the napkin and slipped it into my pocket. "I've been a target since the moment I started digging. This isn't just about Marcus anymore. It's about taking Finch down." Amelia gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Then I wish you luck, Mr. Carter. You'll need it." As I left the restaurant, my thoughts swirled with the enormity of what I'd just learned. Marcus had stumbled onto something far more sinister than I'd imagined. If I wanted to find him and survive, I'd have to outsmart a criminal mastermind and his entire network. The facility was my next stop. Whatever Marcus had hidden there, it was worth risking everything to uncover. The location Amelia provided led me to an abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place where deals were made in the shadows and secrets were buried beneath concrete. The address on the napkin pointed to an old warehouse. Rusted corrugated steel walls, shattered windows, and a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. It didn't scream secure facility, but then again, that was probably the point. I parked a few blocks away and approached on foot, my breath visible in the chilly night air. Every instinct told me this was a trap. But if Marcus had gone to the trouble of hiding his evidence here, it wasn't something I could walk away from. The gate was locked, but the chain was loose enough to slip through. Once inside, I crouched low and moved toward the building, scanning for security cameras or tripwires. The warehouse loomed above me, its darkened windows like empty eyes. At the side entrance, I found a keypad, its numbers worn from use. The code wasn't in Marcus's files, but I remembered the sequence from something else. Our office's alarm system. I punched in the numbers, holding my breath. The The door clicked open. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and dark, the air thick with the scent of oil and decay. My flashlight's beam cut through the shadows, revealing rows of rusted shelving units and scattered debris. At first glance, it looked abandoned, but there was an order to the chaos. A cleared path led to the back of the warehouse, where a steel hatch was embedded in the floor. I knelt beside it, running my hand over the cold metal. There was no visible lock, but a biometric scanner blinked to life as I hovered my hand near it. I hesitated. Marcus hadn't mentioned this part. Could the scanner even recognize me? Only one way to find out. I placed my hand on the pad. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the scanner beeped and the hatch hissed open, revealing a staircase leading into darkness. "Here we go," I muttered, descending into the unknown. The lower level was a stark contrast to the decrepit warehouse above. Polished concrete walls, dim LED strips lining the floor, and rows of server racks humming with life. It was like stepping into a Bond villain's lair. At the center of the room was a workstation with a massive monitor, its screen locked behind another password prompt. This time I knew the answer. Marcus loved ciphers and puzzles, and the password was hidden in the note he'd left me. "To be found, you must first be lost." I typed it in, and the screen came alive with data. Folders labeled Project Finch, Shell Core, Political Payoffs. This was it. Marcus had compiled everything: bank transfers, correspondence, even video recordings of Finch's associates discussing their operations. If this got out, it would destroy Finch and everyone connected to him. But before I could start downloading the files, I heard it. A faint scuff of a shoe on concrete. My blood ran cold. I extinguished my flashlight and ducked behind the server racks, straining to listen. Another sound, closer this time. Someone else was here. The shadows shifted as a figure emerged from the staircase. He moved with precision, his steps deliberate. A flashlight beam swept across the room, landing briefly on the workstation before continuing its search. "Whoever's down here," a voice called out, deep and commanding, "you're already too late. Hand over the data, and we might let you walk out of here alive." I stayed silent, my heart pounding in my chest. The man wasn't alone. Two more figures descended the stairs, each armed with tactical rifles. Finch's men. My mind raced. The evidence was within arm's reach, but there was no way I could take on 3 trained operatives. I needed a plan. Fast. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, praying the signal was strong enough. With a few taps, I initiated a remote upload of the files to a secure cloud server. The process was agonizingly slow, the progress bar creeping forward 1% at a time. The men spread out, their footsteps echoing through the room. One of them passed within feet of my hiding spot, his rifle sweeping the area. "Find him," the leader ordered. "He's here somewhere." I spotted a fire suppression system on the wall, an old-style CO2 release mechanism. If I could trigger it, the room would fill with gas, giving me a chance to escape. But it was a gamble. The noise would give away my position, and I'd only have seconds to act. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed a loose piece of metal from the floor and hurled it across the room. It clattered against the far wall, drawing their attention. "There!" one of them shouted, moving toward the noise. Seizing the moment, I sprinted to the suppression system and slammed my fist into the release valve. A deafening hiss filled the room as white gas billowed out, obscuring everything. Coughing and disoriented, I grabbed a portable hard drive from the workstation and bolted for the stairs. Shots rang out behind me, but the gas provided enough cover to escape. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, the hard drive clutched tightly in my hand. The upload had completed just in time, the data now safely stored off-site. But Finch's men wouldn't stop. They'd seen my face, and they knew I had the evidence. The clock was ticking, and if I wanted to survive, I'd have to take the fight to them. I knew driving back to my apartment wasn't an option. Finch's men were professionals. They'd already tracked me to the warehouse, which meant they could follow me anywhere. I needed a safe haven, someplace off the grid where I could regroup and decide my next move. The only person I trusted right now was Amelia. Despite the tension between us earlier, she was the only one who seemed genuinely invested in uncovering the truth about Marcus. I dialed her number as I navigated through the darkened streets, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. She picked up after the second ring. Ryan, what's going on? Are you okay? I've got the evidence, I said, my voice low. But Finch's men found me. I barely got out. There was a pause. Where are you now? Nowhere safe. I need a place to lay low. Meet me at the storage unit, she said. You know the one. I did. It was a nondescript facility on the edge of town, one of Marcus's many hidden assets. If there was one place Finch's men wouldn't think to look, it was there. I arrived 20 minutes later, parking my car in an unlit corner of the lot. The place was deserted, the only sound the hum of distant traffic. Amelia was already there, leaning against her car, her arms crossed. You look like hell, she said as I approached. Feel like it too, I replied, holding up the hard drive. This is everything Marcus was hiding. Bank records, correspondence, video evidence. It's enough to bring Finch down. Amelia's eyes widened. You actually found it? I nodded. But they know I have it. It's only a matter of time before they find me again. She led me inside the storage unit, where a small table and a pair of folding chairs were set up. A laptop sat on the table, its screen glowing faintly. Let's see what we're dealing with, she said, taking the hard drive and plugging it in. As the files loaded, I felt a sense of relief mixed with unease. The evidence was there, but it was a double-edged sword. Exposing Finch and his network would undoubtedly save countless lives, but it would also paint a target on my back, and on Amelia's too. We spent the next hour combing through the files. Every document, every video was damning. Finch wasn't just embezzling money, he was orchestrating a web of corruption that reached into politics, law enforcement, and even international trade. This is bigger than I thought, Amelia said, her voice tinged with awe and fear. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. Marcus must have known he couldn't take Finch down alone. That's why he left the trail, for us to finish what he started. Amelia looked at me, her expression unreadable. But why disappear? Why not confront Finch directly? I think he knew it was a suicide mission, I said quietly. He faked his death to buy time, to make Finch think he was out of the picture. But now that we have this, I gestured to the screen, we're the ones in the crosshairs. Before she could respond, a noise outside made us both freeze, the unmistakable sound of car doors slamming shut. They're here, I whispered, my heart racing. Amelia closed the laptop and stashed the hard drive in her bag. We can't stay here. There's a back exit. We moved quickly, keeping low as we exited through a side door. Outside, the night was eerily quiet, the storage facility bathed in shadows. We crept along the edge of the lot, avoiding the headlights of the cars parked near the main entrance. Over here, Amelia whispered, leading me to her car. Just as we reached it, a voice called out behind us. Don't move! I turned to see two men, their silhouettes barely visible in the dim light. They were armed, their weapons trained on us. Hand over the hard drive, one of them ordered. Amelia and I exchanged a glance. She gave a barely perceptible nod, and I knew what she was thinking. I raised my hand slowly, stepping forward. Okay, take it easy. We'll give you what you want. As their attention shifted to me, Amelia reached into her bag. In one swift motion, she pulled out a small canister and sprayed a thick cloud of pepper spray at the men. They shouted in pain, their hands going to their eyes. Run! Amelia yelled, throwing the bag to me. We sprinted to her car as the men recovered, their shouts turning into threats. Shots rang out, shattering the back windshield as we sped away. My hands were trembling as I clutched the bag. That was close. Amelia's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. It's going to get closer. They're not going to stop until we're dead. She was right. The evidence we had was enough to bring Finch's empire crashing down, but it also made us the most wanted people on his hit list. As we drove into the night, one thing was clear. We couldn't run forever. If we wanted to survive, we'd have to strike first. Amelia and I drove in silence, the hard drive still clutched tightly in my lap. My thoughts raced as we sped away from the storage facility. Finch's men wouldn't give up easily, and we were running out of places to hide. The evidence we had was enough to expose everything. Marcus's disappearance, the offshore accounts, the shadowy network of corruption. But it wouldn't mean anything if we didn't survive long enough to use it. We need a plan, Amelia said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but I could see the tension in her hands as they gripped the steering wheel. We need help, I replied. Someone who can protect us and ensure this information gets out. Amelia nodded. I might know someone. An investigative journalist. She's independent, has no ties to corporate interests, and she's been after Finch for years. Do you trust her? As much as I trust anyone in this mess, she said. Her name is Lila Porter. If anyone can blow this story wide open, it's her. We reached a small diner on the outskirts of the city, a neutral location where we could contact Lila without drawing too much attention. The place was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights casting a dim glow over the worn vinyl booths. Amelia made the call while I kept an eye on the entrance, scanning for any sign of Finch's men. Lila arrived an hour later, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She slid into the booth across from us, her notebook already open. Amelia says, you have something big, she said, cutting straight to the point. I'll need proof before I commit to anything. I handed her the hard drive. This is everything Marcus Elwood was trying to expose before he disappeared. Offshore accounts, laundering schemes, political bribery, and a direct link to Solomon Finch. Lila's eyes widened as she connected her laptop and began scrolling through the files. This is incredible. If this checks out, it's enough to bring down Finch and half the power brokers in the city. It's real, Amelia said. But Finch knows we have it. His people are hunting us. We need your help to get this out safely. Lila leaned back, her expression serious. If I publish this, it's going to make waves. But you're right. Finch won't stop until he's silenced everyone involved. You'll need protection. Do you have contacts who can help? I asked. A few, Lila replied. I'll make some calls, but you need to be ready for what comes next. Once this goes public, there's no going back. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Lila worked tirelessly, verifying the information on the hard drive and preparing her story. Meanwhile, Amelia and I stayed in a safe house provided by one of Lila's contacts. It was a small, nondescript apartment in a quiet neighborhood. But even there, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The tension reached its peak the following evening. Lila called to inform us that her article was ready and that she'd scheduled a live-stream press conference to release the evidence. It was a bold move, one that would ensure maximum exposure, but also draw Finch's attention. Are you sure about this? I asked her over the phone. Positive, she replied. The more public we make this, the harder it will be for Finch to suppress it. But you and Amelia need to be there. Your testimony will give it credibility. We'll be there, I said, though my stomach churned at the thought. The press conference was held in a crowded downtown venue, with reporters and cameras filling every inch of the space. Lila stood at the podium, her voice steady as she detailed the findings from the hard drive. Screens behind her displayed incriminating documents, video evidence, and financial records, each piece of evidence more damning than the last. Amelia and I sat in the front row, trying to stay calm as the room buzzed with activity. But my unease grew as I noticed two men in dark suits lingering near the back. Their eyes never left us. They're here, I whispered to Amelia. She nodded, her expression grim. Stay close. We can't let them derail this. As Lila concluded her presentation, the room erupted in questions. But before anyone could answer, the lights suddenly cut out, plunging the venue into darkness. The crowd panicked, and I felt a hand grab my arm. This way, Amelia hissed, pulling me toward a side exit. We stumbled through the chaos, the sound of shouting and footsteps echoing around us. Outside, a black SUV screeched to a halt, and the two men from the back of the room emerged, weapons drawn. Get down, Amelia yelled, shoving me behind a parked car as gunfire erupted. I scrambled for my phone, dialing Lila. Are you okay? I shouted over the noise. I'm fine, she replied. The story's live. Finch can't stop it now. Relief mixed with fear as I realized the truth of her words. Finch's empire was crumbling, but his desperation made him even more dangerous. We needed to disappear, at least until the dust settled. Amelia and I managed to escape the scene, blending into the night as sirens wailed in the distance. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Marcus's plan had worked. The truth was out, but our fight wasn't over yet. Weeks later, I sat in a small cafe in a remote town, watching the news on a grainy television. Solomon Finch had been arrested, along with dozens of his associates. The fallout from Lila's expose was unprecedented, shaking the foundations of power across multiple industries. Amelia sat across from me, a faint smile on her lips. We did it. Yeah, I said, though my thoughts lingered on Marcus. He was still out there somewhere, watching from the shadows. His plan had cost him everything, but he'd achieved what he set out to do. As I sipped my coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Finch's network was vast, and not everyone would go down without a fight. But for now, the truth was enough, and the world was watching.